Hey everybody, I'm back with another video following up on the LGBTQ laws over in African countries. We're going to look at some good news and then go into some challenges that still exist in African nations about laws that are being passed, legislation being passed for LGBTQ people. So let's go to the good news first. Okay, this is going to be about there are 6 African countries that have legalized same sex relationships in the past 10 years, which is great news. We're just going to go through a little bit of all of them. Uh, these laws have been passed all since about 2012, 2015, up through about 2023. So Angola, they made a new penal code, penal code that came into effect that removed provisions against nature and added some discrimination practices. So that's laws against same-sex sexual relationships. So that's there for Angola. In Botswana, the High Court there struck down the colonial LGBTQ laws, and that stopped legally that practice of that law. But recently in 2021, that law was actually removed from the books over in Botswana. And so Botswana does have legal same-sex marriage. Mozambique, they omitted the colonial era vices against nature clause, which is another colonial era law against same-sex relationships. We got Lesotho in 2012. They adopted a new penal code where same-sex male acts are no longer criminalized. Female same-sex acts were never criminalized, which is an interesting point because a lot of these nations, they are doing things against the men, but not the women. So for me, that's sexism and misogyny because they're not even counting the women in same sex, which lesbians are part of the gay community just like the men are. So that's an interesting point there. Seychelles, the assembly there voted to repeal the section of the penal code criminalizing same-sex acts. And Mauritius declared their colonial law against same-sex relationships unconstitutional, and that was as recent as 2023. So that's some good news there. So what we're going to go into now is some of the challenges that we have still over in African nations, and we'll go into that. Okay, I'm sharing a story, and I'm sorry, I forgot to mention that the source for this story is Bold Network Africa, which is a firm that is dedicated telling real life stories of African queer people who have decided to be bold and out loud about their queerness, gayness, transness, all of that. And what I suspected in my early videos is true. A lot of these anti-LGBTQ laws are from when Africa was colonized by white Europeans and they were not indigenous to Africa. So we're going to go through some of that. That was a colonial import, the criminalization of queerness. Many of those laws were passed and written in those African nations several hundreds of years ago by European administrations. And so African people have adopted those values. They're not Native African. There's a long, diverse heritage of societies in Africa. Indigenous in the indigenous African gender roles, they've always been diverse. Some examples that are given are the Dako of Uganda, Magawi of Kenya, and Shatime of Ethiopia. So I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing some of these names, but the information is the main point I'm making. There were women-to-women marriages that were indigenous in Africa in communities like Gamba, Nandi, Igbo, and practiced Iweto, which was women built lives, homes, and futures together. So there was woman-to-woman marriages that were indigenous in African societies. Queerness is not un-African, but the erasure definitely is. Decolonization isn't about the land or the governance. It's about who gets to define humanity and reclaim the ability to define African-owned traditions under Africans' own terms. So that's my follow-up on that. I am going to solicit again your comments on these laws in Africa, which I mentioned in my previous video. Some are really the influence of these white evangelical organizations like the Family Watch International, which are based in the US and are conservative groups that are influencing the governments in Africa to pass some of these laws. Many stories that I've read on the African nations are people like, we have bigger fish to fry, we have more important issues than you to be passing these anti-LGBTQ laws, which don't have anything to do with the poverty, the resources being stolen in Africa, like in the Democratic Republic of Congo, genocide there over cell phone components like cobalt and for those of you who don't know, those are components that are in the cell phones, these smartphones that we use all across the world. Most of those minerals are found in Africa, in the Congo. So those are more important issues that need to be addressed in Africa rather than targeting a minority group, which from my research is why a lot of these countries are starting to pass laws that protect LGBTQ people in African nations. Please get down in the comments and let me know your thoughts. Take care until the next video.